Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Catherine Andrews.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We're here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Catherine. Welcome, everyone. So if you're among the many people who are in the process of either writing or trying to begin your New Year's resolutions, if any of them have to do with health or diet, you're going to want to listen today because we have a great guest. This is a longtime friend of ours, David Matthew, who is going to shed some light on plant-based diets.
So David has an extensive background in metaphysics. He has a doctorate in spiritual physics. He has worked and lived in spiritual community. He is an energy worker and a holistic healer. And he's also the creator of Heart Flow Healing. So you can find that at Hearts Flow, that's plural, Hearts, heartsflowhealing.com. And you can reach him for questions after the show at david@heartsflowhealing.com. Welcome, David.
Well, hello, Patrick, and hello, Catherine.
I'm excited
Glad to be here.
Thank you, David. So I think we need to start with your story so that folks understand how you decided to go to a plant-based diet. So do you want to share what got you on this road to health?
Sure. Back about 10 years ago, I had dabbled as a vegetarian many years ago, back in college and afterwards, but through life, I had eaten pretty much the way most of us eat in the Western world, in the United States. Over those many years, I developed coronary artery disease, quite a severe version of it. And I started experiencing a great deal of pain in my chest, and I knew what was going on, having had my father pass away at the young age of 45. I had passed him by several years, but still, I knew what was going on, and I had to go to the hospital and check it out, which led to stents and the discovery of the severity of my disease. And I remember the doctor telling me, that he would be there for me the next time. And something about that didn't sit well in my mind, that there would be a next time. Well, I recognize that coronary artery disease is a progressive disease. There are treatments and drugs and surgeries and such things as that might assist, at least symptomatically, haven't been proven so much to necessarily extend life. So I left the hospital fully desiring to find out, what do I actually do about this that will be effective and not leave me waiting for that next time or that next drug? So I found myself up in Maine at a health food store very shortly thereafter, and I met a guy, and to make a long story short, he wrote down on a piece of paper the name Esselstyn, Esselstyn, and told me to go home and Google it. Well, when I got back to the hotel where I happened to be staying, I did Google it, and I was hooked. I recognized very quickly that this gentleman, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, from the Cleveland Clinic, was onto something that was helping severely ill patients to overcome the what seemed to be the inevitable. And many of these people were far worse off than I was, and they were still alive 20, 30 years later and had zero additional cardiac events, meaning that the progression had been ceased. It desisted, and they were all living full, happy lives not taking any further medications, and therefore, without any further events, they weren't having hospital interventions. And so I got on board. I was heavy. I had lived on a farm, and I ate well, and
Or so you thought.
well, so I thought. Let's put it this way: I never missed a meal, and I gained quite a bit of weight. It was all organic. I thought I was doing the right thing with eating the cattle and the chickens and the pigs, along with the garden and the orchard. But that became a period of time where I was doing incredibly well. All that weight was off of me. I was way down from obesity down to a very middle of the road perfect weight for my body, and I wasn't experiencing any pain that I'd been experiencing daily up until that point. And it didn't take very long for that to happen. So I don't know how far in my story I should go at this point. I will say this much more. It's a kind of a lonely road unless you actually have people in your environment that that understand and catch on and are willing to change their lifestyle. Changing a lifestyle is not an easy thing to do, and it particularly becomes more difficult when you're the only one doing it in your world. So what can happen is I went about 3 years being 100% totally compliant with eating a whole food plant-based diet, and symptoms were gone. But just like a cigarette smoker beginning to smoke a cigarette again, it can open some doors back to some old habits. And little by little, I allowed some symptoms to come back in, and severity came back. And without going into much more about that, I had some heart attacks, and they wanted to do open heart surgery on me, but I was not about to let them do it because I felt so silly and so foolish, because I knew it was so unnecessary for me to be experiencing symptoms in the first place. So I returned to my awareness, and basically made it my mission to, not only for my own needs, but for the needs of others, to remain compliant, and to help others to determine a lifestyle change that's actually effective for coronary artery disease specifically, but more generally, most every chronic disorder that people are experiencing that are listening to this right now are diet related. And the same diet works for coronary artery disease, will also work for diabetes, obesity, stroke, peripheral artery disease, many cancers, and many other chronic conditions. So I hope that this program that you'll be listening to right now will be helpful and effective for you.
Wow. So I have a couple of questions based on your story. So first of all, 45 seems very young. You said your father passed away at 45 from a heart attack. So how was his diet? Was it pretty much like you were talking about with the animal products, big hearty meat dishes? And I know some people have this thing about meat and potatoes. That's the cornerstone of diet.
Well, he grew up in the 40s, 30s, and 40s. And those were days when actually cigarettes were promoted as healthy. You had doctors in commercials and in all kind of print smoking Camel or smoking whatever. So, he wasn't raised during a time when there was a whole lot of awareness of what indeed was healthy. And it was also at a time when increasing use of meat type of products, animal products, was definitely on the increase, as were all of these chronic conditions. So yes, of course, that was his diet, as it was mine as well.
My grandfather died of a heart attack, and I remember my dad was saying, all these years when he was growing up, the kids would help make breakfast, and he was thinking he was doing this great thing. They had bacon every morning for breakfast and eggs, and they didn't realize that all these things were building up all this plaque. He later went on to have heart disease as well. And he went on a similar path as you. I wouldn't say his diet is the same, but he decided not to do the surgery. So he went home. They had some medication to help his blood work get down to healthier levels. But then he started walking 2 miles every day. It was religious. He called it his heart attack walk. And so rain or shine, yeah. So rain or shine, it didn't matter. If it was raining, he went to the mall, and we've got a mall up there close to him, and he's got the whole thing mapped out. He goes once around the top and bottom, and that's a mile. And so he does that twice. And then he's got a route. If he's over at my mom's house, he's got a route that he goes that's 2 miles. If he's at his house, he has got a route that he does that's 2 miles. So he just makes sure that he gets that exercise in, and he's very diligent with his diet. Although I'm not going to get into his diet because I don't think it is healthy quite to the extent that yours is. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about your plant-based diet, because I know there's a lot of benefit there that people can get. The other thing I was wanting to ask too, just to clarify, so when you were talking about when you were getting to your ideal weight, was that after you got onto your plant-based diet?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
I
so up
watched
until
it.
that point, you would describe yourself as overweight. So once you got onto this plant-based diet that you're going to be talking about, that your body just kind of did it, kind of find its healthy weight sort of on its own?
Absolutely. But remember, I wouldn't call myself overweight. I would put myself in the classification with what most people in America are, which is obese. It goes a little bit beyond the overweight category. And what was exciting for me when it comes to weight, at least, and this, of course, was not my prime directive at the time. It was not to lose weight. It was to benefit my body's health in general, and specifically my heart. But it was amazing to watch over a period of time, and it was a relatively short period of time. I'll tell you, I'm 5'8", about 5'8.5", depends on whether I've done yoga or not. Stretch out just a little bit, but nevertheless, I had gotten myself up to 210 pounds. It might have actually got to 212 once or twice over those years, but did I? Yeah, 210. And it was amazing to watch. I called them decades, because instead of being that person that didn't step on the scales, I watched it, and I recorded it because I was interested in it. And I watched myself got out of the decade of the 2000s, 200s, down into the 190s, to the 180s, to the 170s. And every time was like a milestone when I saw a new number, and it was actually stabilizing there, to the 160s, to the 150s, to where finally I found myself hitting a 145. And that's a lot of weight to lose in a relatively short period of time. I don't recall exactly the length of time, but it was a matter of months, not years. And I looked good. I didn't know, I didn't know what my toes looked like. Now I could see my toes.
So what was the transition diet? I mean, did you just go cold turkey, or kind of fill us in on what you eat so that you stay motivated and it tastes good?
The motivation was I felt amazing. I felt amazing. Sluggishness was gone. I never got tired. My energy was, it felt infinite. And so that was my motivation. And what was my transition diet? My transition diet was one day eating steak and eggs and washing it down with milk. And the next day eating whole grains, legumes with very little salt, vegetables in copious amounts, specifically deep green leafy vegetables, and fruit became a very strong part of my diet. And it took me, it really took me possibly 1 minute to transition into that diet.
Yeah. Well,
Or
did
it was
you,
immediate.
I don't think there really is a middle of the road, like, okay, just eat half a steak today. It's like, if you're going to do it, do it. And I think that's when you see the benefits, right? Because if you kind of do a little transition, you might not feel much better. So you're like, oh, well, I might as well go back to eating the full set of meat and potatoes that I was, because I'm not feeling as good as I could. Um, so I know when I've tried different diets, when I do it like 100%, just right off the bat, then you feel the difference and you're like, oh my gosh. So I think people miss the boat when they try to kind of ease into something because they don't get the full effect, and then they're not motivated.
That's exactly right. As a matter of fact, a class that I'm teaching right now of individuals who have come to me for various physical needs, I've started them on a 30-day challenge regarding switching over from what they're doing. And we had that discussion, as a matter of fact, last night about, do you do it a little bit at a time or not? Well, I have a philosophy of this, that most effective would be to make the decision and recognize you're a human being that's got the free will to make a decision, and you're not an animal. You don't have to follow your instincts, your compulsions, and habits. You can actually make a decision and follow through with it. Now, we're not perfect. And since we're not perfect, what I also would tell them is, okay, get started and realize that this is your intention. Now, let's say you find yourself having consumed something that is not of your intention at this point. Do not allow that to become your excuse to get right back into the old and to give up. Instead, just get right back on the horse. Next time, perhaps you'll extend that length of time to where you fall off the horse, so to speak. And little by little, if you keep your attention on your intention, it will become easier and easier. You'll be experiencing the benefits from it. And it becomes a way of life. So,
Well, and I thought it was interesting, David, when you said, it was a lonely world when you found out about your heart condition, and you were the only one that was changing your diet and didn't really know anybody else who was going through that path. And I think a lot of people experience that when they find out they're ill and they don't have a group around them of holistic people that will encourage them on that path as opposed to the, pharmaceutical path. And I think that's a huge thing. So how, with what you're doing, are you addressing this problem of, feeling isolated and lonely with your condition?
well, many years ago, I had the vision of creating a support group where I myself would benefit, as well as those that would become a part of it. And there was no support group, but there was Facebook groups, and things like that. But that's really not the same, as you can imagine, as rubbing elbows with people, giving hugs, and caring for each other and loving each other. So that idea came to me many years ago, and it just perked along the way for a long time until now, that I'm offering these courses and eventually some online classes and such things. And uh, I will get my support group, or I've currently got my support group, and I'm just helping it to expand currently. It is a challenge. I mean, when an individual, like my wife went with me, Gail, my wife, went with me to that first meeting with Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn up at Cleveland Clinic, who taught me exactly what he was doing that was so beneficial. And that was of tremendous benefit, because then she could understand, whether she took it on or not, she could understand what I was trying to accomplish and became extremely supportive. Again, that's not quite the same as her cooking her food and me cooking my food instead of us cooking our food. We did it for a while, but that's really a different topic. You really do need someone close to you that at least completely supports you and understands your lifestyle choice, and backs you up in such a manner that they don't try to sabotage your efforts. That's critical. That's critical. Um, but a group is better. A group of people doing the same thing, obviously, is far more effective.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like you don't want your spouse coming in there with, steak broiling and walking by with donuts and, that
No.
just would not be supportive.
Well, it's not supportive, but I still come back to what I said a moment ago. We are human beings. We have free will. We can make our choices. And A strength of will is actually a worthy goal. Is it not?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is an opportunity to exercise your will, to make your whole being stronger, more in alignment with holistic thoughts, more in alignment with love. It is a tremendous opportunity to take control of and overcome these incredibly devastating habits that many times people are not even aware that these habits are incredibly devastating and shortening their lives and causing a lot of suffering and misery, which is completely unnecessary in the first place.
So now, when you're talking about this diet, my understanding is it's a completely plant-based diet. So you're talking about eliminating all animal products. Now, the big elephant in the room is, what about the protein? I keep hearing people who are vegetarian or people who are thinking about becoming vegetarian. Everybody's always worried about, well, where do I get my protein if I'm not eating meat?
Well, that's a great question. Let's go on a little visualization trip for a moment. Let's drive out into the country past fields of cattle. They look healthy, don't they? They're big and strong, and you got a bull over in the corner that's coming into rut, and he starts coming over there flexing his muscles to all the cows. Where does he get his protein that builds these unbelievably strong muscles?
Is he eating grasshoppers?
Must be
They're
devastating to
sneaking, they're
grasshoppers.
sneaking grasshoppers in between the munches of grass. There you
That's
go.
got to be the answer. Yes, of course. No, obviously he's munching on grass and whatever other vegetation he can get his mouth on. Let's go to a gorilla. How many animals, and they're incredibly strong, almost humanoid looking. And they're in the jungle. How many animals do they have to track down every day to fulfill that incredible hunger that resides within them so they can build that strong, incredibly strong body? What's the answer? How many animals do gorillas eat?
10.
10.
No,
Wrong
we all have
answer.
the image. They're eating the bananas, whatever they can pull off the trees, and yeah, the
Yeah.
fruit.
Yeah, they're eating berries, they're eating greens, vegetation. They're vegetarians. They're vegan. They don't eat eggs, drink milk. So they're vegans as well. I know that you all told me that last night that you had watched a YouTube video that I had recommended called
Game
now I'm not gonna,
changers.
the Game Changers.
That's actually on
And
Netflix right now.
it's on Netflix. Okay. Yes, exactly. It's worth it for anybody listening to check out that particular program. And there are many others. But on there is the story of a fellow. I don't remember what country he is from, but he is considered the strongest man in the world. He was able to carry, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to be wrong on my numbers, but who cares? 1,200 pounds, was able to lift and carry it. It was either 30 feet or 30 yards. Doesn't really matter. I don't think I could pick it up and move it an inch.
It
But
was amazing to see. And yeah, it was about 1,224 pounds.
exactly, yeah. To be anal about it. Um,
Yeah, he said when he was carrying that obviously when you're walking and carrying something, it's not like the weightlifters in the Olympics where they do a clean. I think that's called a clean press. You know, they lift it over their head. But anyway, he had to walk with it, and he said when you have that much weight and you have to take that step, there's a point where all of that weight is on just one leg, and he's like, my biggest fear was that my bones were just going to collapse under all that weight, because here he was, the strongest man in the world. Obviously they didn't. I think he built his bones really strong too, but yeah, it was amazing to watch him carry
well, I
that.
want you to remember that statement about building his bones
Hmm.
very strong as well for what I'm about to say. You know, we always have the image, and it was a mistaken image. It was uh, unfortunately instigated back in the late 1800s, and all of the animal industry decided to use this study from a doctor to promote their chickens and their pigs and their cows and their all the animal foods. That the only way to build athletes have got to eat meat. They've got to eat steak and copious amounts of this kind of thing. Well, this particular doctor, he discovered later that he was wrong, but by that point it was too late. The fellow that lifted this 1,224 pounds is completely vegan, completely whole food, plant-based nutrition. His muscles are unbelievable, obviously, to be able to lift that kind of weight. And that program also brings out the fact that there are numerous athletes, Olympic athletes, that into older age than any of the other athletes are setting records and never tire out and are doing unbelievably fascinating things that are no longer burdening their bodies with animal products.
All right. Well, David, that's our music for the break. So let's pause on that thought and we'll put a pin in it until after the break. So we're going to be coming back with the story of the strongest man in the world, how he's on a plant-based diet and how he manages to do that. So as we go into the break, please keep in mind that Truth Frequency Radio is a listener-supported station, so you can go to our page and check it out. This is Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio, and we will see you on the other side. Welcome back to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. And we are here with David Matthews, who is talking to us about how he went to a completely plant-based diet and how that changed his life. And if David, welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back.
So you were telling us about the strongest man in the world and how he is a vegan, which is fascinating to me because most people think that vegetarians are wimps. So,
yeah.
So where were we?
Well, we had brought up a subject that I didn't discuss, and I only want to hit on it briefly though, about this fella. You had mentioned how he would have to carry this 1,224 pounds forward, and as instead of just standing where all that weight was on both legs, which is still an enormous weight, it would squash us, he had to put all his weight on one foot, one leg. And that one leg had to support 1,224 pounds in motion. And that would require incredibly strong bones. And I want to go into the calcium discussion for just a moment, because most people have been trained to believe, and this is advertisement training. This is industry training from the dairy industry, that drink milk.
Yeah, I grew up and
make strong bones. We all did. Yes.
Yeah, people still insist the only way you can get calcium is through dairy products. In fact, I think my mom just said that to me recently.
Yeah, and it's fortunately and unfortunately not true. In fact, some of the greater bioavailability of calcium comes from vegetables, specifically deep green leafy vegetables, but there are amounts in most vegetation, and it's of a very, very high grade. And in fact, the milk itself is a lower grade calcium. And the other thing to add to that is, remember, it is also an animal protein. The casein is the protein in dairy products, and it is basically a promoter of cancer. During the promotion stage and development of cancer, animal proteins in general promote cancer growth. So obviously that's not something that we would want to continue consuming on a day in, day out basis.
Well,
But
and also isn't what I had studied is that when you eat an overabundance of, protein from animal products, it actually, you have to neutralize the blood. And so it leaches then calcium from the bones. So over consumption of protein actually causes osteoporosis. Is that true?
yeah, our whole society is way over proteined. We've all got way too much protein in our diets, specifically the wrong variety.
Now we got
When
the
it does come
Atkins
from
diet.
animals. Do what now?
Now we've got the Atkins diet, the ultimate
Absolutely.
protein diet.
Or
Absolutely.
keto?
We've got keto also,
Well,
an
keto is mostly
incredible.
fat, though, like
No,
lots and lots of fat,
No,
right?
yeah, it's a high fat diet. It's
but
intended
also high protein. It's just basically
Yeah,
no
fat and
carbs.
protein, no carbs.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too deeply into keto right now. I can only say that, unfortunately, it has an incredible effect on certain things that people are after, such as losing weight. But the damage done is incredible. And I know there are those listening doing keto that would probably want to argue with me, and I don't want to argue. I'd rather debate and look at some of the science behind it. It's a very effective weight loss program. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about whole food, plant-based nutrition. We're not even here yet to talk about very many of the scientific research that definitely backs it up, not to mention all of the testimonials from those such as myself and so many others. I'll tell you one briefly right now, and I'll just give a just secondhand testimonial. There's this woman that was, I think she was 82 at the time, and she had end stage congenital heart failure. And the doctors at the hospital had said, go home and prepare to die. So she went home, and fortunately, her daughter read a little bit about whole food plant-based nutrition, and her mom was in bad condition. But she got her on some smoothies that were only whole food plant-based. And little by little, her mom started responding, feeling better. She wasn't going downhill quite as bad. To make a longer story short, it's been about 5-6 years when she was supposed to have died, and she is driving her own car at 86, 87, 88 years of age. She's swimming 2, 3, 4 times a week, and she basically has a independent lifestyle, which is a whole lot better than the alternative that she was facing. And the thing about it is that is not an isolated example. The examples go on and on and on and on. And there's no downside to whole food plant-based nutrition. There's only an upside.
So I know that a lot of people are probably very curious. I know that we are. Can you kind of walk us through, because we've been talking about this plant-based diet, but I really don't have a concrete image of what that actually looks like on a daily basis. Can you walk us through what you eat on a daily basis and how you go about doing that?
Yes, but let's break it down first of all into 4 categories. The 4 categories are legumes, your beans, your peas, your lentils. Your second category are your vegetables, and we all know what vegetables are. There are a lot more vegetables than most of us ever pay any attention to. Our third are fruits, and our fourth are whole grains. So, bottom line is, it would be best to think about those 4 things on a daily basis, and think of them in the standpoint of whole food, not as processed food, not as highly salted, highly sugared foods, but the whole food itself. So what does that look like? Most every day, and I don't expect anybody else to do exactly what I do, but what I do is incredibly effective to get everything that my body is looking for nutritionally. In the morning, I have a walk that I bought back when I was in college in the early 70s, when I was vegetarian, and I've still got that hanging with me today. And I'll put it on a gas burner, and I'll go in and I will cut up things like the following: red onions, there's a reason for red. There's an antioxidant reason for red. I cut up jalapenos, cayenne peppers, mushrooms of various varieties, and garlic. And I put those in the skillet on low heat, trying to just kind of caramelize them a little bit. I have to turn the heat up to really caramelize them, but that's kind of serves as a base. And then I look at root vegetables, the things that are going to take the longest to eat. So I enjoy all the varieties of root vegetables, for instance, beets or turnips or parsnips and carrots, all these kind of things that have all of these various colorations. Colors are extremely important in a whole food plant-based diet, in any diet, even if you're eating poorly. The more color you can get in your diet, at least you have an opportunity for antioxidants to neutralize some of the damaging effects of eating a bad diet. So those that will not change to whole food plant-based, listen to what I just said with color in your diet. And I work through all of these types of items till I let those kind of cook, and eventually add just enough water to kind of turn it into a steaming situation, because I don't cook with oil. I don't use oil in my diet in any way, shape, form, or fashion. That's another discussion for another time. So while all that's going on, I take some of the other foods that don't take as long to cook, which is broccoli, bok choy. I take my beans, whether they come out of a can without salt or low sodium or ones I've cooked myself. I pour in a can of beans. And every single day of my life, I eat copious amounts of oats, whole oats, oat flakes. Of course, those are at the very end. Before I put the oat flakes on, I've got all of my kale, my Swiss chard, or my, I've grown in the past moringa. I love moringa. I found a source for that now, but I can grow it. Spinach, which only takes a few moments to heat. And so those things kind of lay up on top of everything else that's basically cooked. And then I'll put on the oats and let them start steaming. I don't have to cook them long and make it into an oatmeal. In the meantime, I've cut up some red and yellow and orange peppers into pieces. They're one of those foods that are best eaten raw, and we're not going to discuss that right now either. But they're one of those things that the greater nutritional benefit is eating them raw. And I put those on top to warm them up. So I turn that off, and I get a big bowl, and I sit down and I eat it. And a little bit later in the day, I eat it again. And a little bit later, I eat that again. Now, what I've done is I have gotten my whole grains, my beans, and my vegetables in copious abundance throughout that day, and it's unbelievably delicious. I did fail to mention that spicing-wise, I add turmeric every day, a significant amount, along with a mustard powder, mustard seed powder, which there's a reason for that we won't go into right now, and black pepper that we won't go into right now. And then any other spice that I'd like, along with, and one of my favorite ingredients ever for 30 years plus, 40 years almost, is good tasting nutritional yeast. So that's my vegetation. That's my vegetable end of things, and grains and fruits, as I've said.
And David,
I haven't said fruits. Now I want to talk fruits.
Well, I want to make one comment, David, because I am not totally plant-based. I'm moving in that direction, but I eat really great diet in terms of I'll have squash in the morning with green beans and maybe a salmon patty. And people would I hear people say, "Oh, I don't have time for that." And when you start doing it, you realize, okay, how long does it take to chop a squash in half and stick it in the oven? It does have to bake 45 minutes, but you do it the night before or the first thing when you get up in the morning, you go down, you stick it in the oven. This does not have to take that long. And once you kind of have it down to a science, all the chopping, it's not that labor intensive. And I loved what you said, that you can make a whole batch and then you've got your breakfast, your lunch, and maybe your dinner too, right there. So really that's like 3 meals in one that you've already got done for the entire day.
You know how big a wok is, correct?
Yeah.
I guess they make small woks. This is a big wok. It's not a a commercial kitchen wok, but it's a big wok. It's full when I'm done. So it goes into the next day. It goes into the next day. And it takes me literally, if I'm really good, I got everything, I pull it all out and I'm in a hurry. 20 minutes later, I'm basically ready to eat. So no, it doesn't take a long time. And I look at it at a couple of ways. You're going to eat. And later in life, you're either going to benefit from what you eat or you're going to have problems. And is it not worth even if it is a little extra effort, which I don't think it is, but even if it is a little extra effort, isn't it a superior choice to take that effort to know that you're causing your life to be far the better for it in the long run?
Oh, of course. And hey, you're saving yourself hours or years sitting in doctor's offices.
Oh, and saving yourself a ton of money and suffering. And our bodies, we could live to be 120 years of age. And there are cultures in our world that do that live to be, the centenarians are copious in many of these cultures. And they eat so similarly to what I just got through describing, and they don't even know of heart disease and cancer and diabetes and obesity. These are not a part of their experience. I'm merely recommending that we begin to look at these things from a different perspective. It's not a radical diet. The radical diet is the one that leads to you having to take an artery out of your leg and sew it into your heart.
Yeah.
Or that's incredibly radical and unnecessary.
Well, and in Game Changers, it was fascinating. They talked about when, we have this conception that cavemen, were meat eaters. And they showed through, some archaeological studies and old bones that actually we ate a majority of fruits and vegetables, not so much meat.
Exactly. And if we had limited our meat to what was experienced as cavemen or the gladiators who were basically vegetarian, we wouldn't have these chronic conditions. But that's not what we've done. Even some of these cultures that are so incredibly healthy, they might have a small amount of meat every so often, but it's not that hit to the system that happens at breakfast and then at lunch and then at dinner and then prior to going to bed, where we're just wreaking havoc on the inner lining of our arteries. The endothelium is just destroyed by most people's diets, and that's the basis of our health. Is our blood flow and of our circulation is full of all this stuff that's causing the arteries to be damaged. It's also causing the cells to be damaged and reducing the lifespan of these cells' abilities to replicate. So, shall I talk briefly about fruit? Just briefly?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
To finish the four corners of this, the corners of, for fruit, of course I eat fruit. I love eating bananas or an apple. But, I've discovered a way to get fruit that is unbelievably fun, quick, unbelievably delicious, and has so many antioxidants in it. And that is, I go down to my local grocery store and I buy bananas that are overly ripe, and they sell a big old bunch of them, several bunches, for $1. They're trying to get rid of them because nobody wants to buy them retail. I'll bring home several bags of this, and I'll get a chopping block and a knife, and I'll peel about 8 or 10 bananas and line them up across from each other, and I'll simply just slice through them into about 4 to 5 slices of banana, and I'll take a cookie sheet and put parchment paper on it, and I'll take these little pieces of banana and I'll put them all over the parchment paper where they don't touch, because I don't want them sticking together. And I'll do as many as I want to do on 1 or 2 or 3 cookie sheets. And I'll take it out to a big deep freeze, and I'll put it in the deep freeze and let them become very, very hard frozen. I buy in bulk blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, things like this, frozen, or that I freeze myself. And I'll pull out my wonderful food processor and I'll throw in 8 pieces of banana, 6 to 8 to 10, which is about a banana and about 2 bananas worth, give or take. And then I'll put in, good handfuls of blueberries and blackberries and these other berries. Berries are the number one fruit. They're the number one fruit for you. So consider berries being a daily staple, regardless of how you eat them. But then on top of that, I'll reach up into a cabinet where I've got dark chocolate powder, got nothing but dark chocolate, no additives to it. And I'll put in a tablespoon, sometimes two, incredible antioxidants. I'll reach down into another cupboard and pull out vanilla extract, just a little bit of vanilla extract. I'll reach up and I've got a shake of cinnamon and the cinnamon powder, a little bit of that in there. So I'm getting some of the benefits of these other things, and I love putting raisins in it because it gives it a texture. They don't become part of the ice cream, which is where I'm going with this. They break up, but they're still texture. And then I reach in and I get my unsweetened almond milk and I pour in just enough to make as hard a soft serve ice cream as I possibly can. Put the top on, flip it on, let it whip. If it doesn't whip well, I put a little bit more almond milk in there until I finally get the most unbelievably delicious ice cream. And I'll sit down with a
amazing because we saw you with the bowl once and I was like, I want some of that.
Oh, it is amazing. It's amazing because there's absolutely nothing about it that will hurt you, and everything about it that actually is. I like to use the term in my work, healing, far more than I like to use the word healthy, because healthy is an overused term, and there's so many gurus and so little time out there for people to be messing around with healthy diets, because healthy diets are not necessarily healthy diets. They're relatively healthy, perhaps, and they might slow progression of chronic disease, perhaps, but it doesn't mean that these diseases are not continuing to progress. So I like to think that I've learned and am continuing to learn of a healing diet that takes these chronic diseases and not only stops their progression, but begins, well, first of all, not only will prevent them occurring in the first place if started young enough, but if we've already got chronic disease, which most everybody does, either known or unknown, or symptomatically or non-symptomatically, then we need to stop their progression as soon as possible. And in many cases, depending on the disease, actually reverse the effects of that disease.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, all those things sound very interesting, and I know very simple to make. And I'm very interested in the ice cream because I really love ice cream, but I'm looking for a healthier way to be able to take that in. And it reminds me of the smoothies that I used to make. I used to do just fruit for like one day a week, and that was kind of like a little mini fast. And so a lot of times I would eat smoothies, and that was how I would often put those together with the frozen bananas. It's so easy. And a lot of times I would actually, one way I would do that is I would just take the bananas and peel them, and then I would just stick them in a freezer bag and just kind of line them up. And I found, I could break them off from each other, and then I would just, because they're hard at this point, so I would just kind of break them into pieces when I put them into my blender, and that's how I used to like to do that. But yeah, that's very delicious, and I wrote down the spices that you talked about with the cinnamon and the chocolate and the vanilla, because that was something I never did add. But yeah, I mean, these are all
Flavor
very
it.
simple things, and I think they're great. I felt great when I did those.
Yeah, well, think about flavor it any way that you like. Some people might want it slightly sweeter, maybe get some real maple syrup, and just a small amount, because just you want to limit your sugar intake. So there was something else I was going to think about there or express right there, but some reason I forgot. So
Well,
let's move on.
yeah, well, so many of us get stumped about, things we thought were true that aren't. So do you want to try to give us some questions and see if we can answer them to dispel some of the myths out there?
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you asked, because I just remembered what it was I wanted to say, and it will lead right into that. I'll ask a question. I'll ask you a question. It's a multiple choice question, A to D, and I believe that it will lead right into talking about that smoothie compared to that ice cream. Okay?
All right.
Why is it best not to make a habit of spitting?
Of spitting. Interesting.
Okay.
I
Now
would
let's.
say because you're
He's
so.
going to give us the
Oh, you're going to
choices.
give us the answers.
Well,
Okay.
if you've got an answer, let's hear your answer. But otherwise, I'm going to give you 4 possible answers.
Okay. Well, I would say because the saliva helps to break down our food.
Well, yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, you took the whole fun away from me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But it goes further than that. So I'm still going to ask you the 4 questions.
Well, some people may not know this, but I do have a background in biology as well as
Yes.
physics. So I had a little bit of an advantage there, actually.
Exactly. So you need to stay more out of this. I'll talk to you, Catherine.
We have a couple of minutes here, by the way, too. We're coming up on the end of the show, unfortunately.
Oh, are we? Well, we may end on this then. A, there are stiff penalties if the police catch you spitting.
That is actually true.
Okay. B, we need to keep all the water in our systems that we are able.
That's true.
C, saliva plays a critical role in our health. Gee, I wonder what the answer is going to be. Or D, moist kissing is far more pleasurable than dry kissing.
I would say all of the above. That sounds like all of the above to me.
I love it. All right, hit
Okay,
us up
well-
with another question.
No. We got to talk about this one. It may be all we talk about.
Okay.
Saliva does play a critical role. It does help in the digestive process, but even as importantly, or perhaps more importantly, there is an enterosalivary system in our bodies where the saliva needs to be swallowed, not only as part of the food, but it needs to be recycled in the body. And there's a reason that I wanted to bring that up. You mentioned smoothies, and I mentioned ice cream just as hard as I could keep it being. We really don't want to drink our food. Most of our food needs to be chewed. It needs to mix with our saliva for many, many reasons, one of which is the word nitric oxide, which again, we're not going to go into at this point, but nitric oxide is one of those molecules in the body that is so important that it can't be overstressed. And if we're running out of time and we don't have a chance to really talk about that, I advise everybody on this call to, not on this call, but on this program that are listening to look it up and learn about nitric oxide and the incredible importance it has in the health of our bodies in every aspect, particularly the arteries. So smoothie, you drink normally. At least ice cream, you can leave it and mix it in your mouth a lot longer. So if you're going to drink anything, a fruit juice, which you should never do, or any kind of juicing. We done?
That's all the time we have for today, David. So thank you for being with us. And we love having you all with us as well. So if you want to get in touch with David Matthews, it's at heartsflowhealing.com. And you can email him at david@heartsflowhealing.com. And so we look forward to having you join us on our Facebook group at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page, and you can check us out at intuitiveschool.com as well. That's intuitiveschool.com. This has been Spirits Journey live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Catherine. Enjoy your fruits and veggies this week, and let's get healthy together.
Goodbye for now.